I thought I'd take a little morning walk around my family's homeland, my mother's homeland in particular. And this is just a little walk. We're here in the Republic of Ireland, down in the southwest, more precisely Cork, West Cork. That's in the province of Munster. It's one of the four ancient provinces of Ireland, or kingdoms as they were called. And there used to be a fifth, Meath, M-E-A-T-H. That's an old Gaelic word for middle. And Meath has gradually, over the years, been assimilated into the other four, so now we have four kingdoms. We're not too far from the edge of the Atlantic coast, or the wild Atlantic Way on the west of Ireland. In the 1800s, when the Irish started to emigrate to America, Canada, elsewhere, these could possibly be some of their final views of Ireland. And maybe they felt they were eventually going to come back, but a lot of them didn't, and they made their lives and raised their families elsewhere in the world. And thank you for those countries for raising and looking after my ancestors. The reason I love it so much here, the beauty of this scenery, this peaceful heartland, and then you get the rough wild shores on the Atlantic coast. It seems it's inspired and even produced a lot of creativity over the years, be it poetry, painting, writing, music. And we're here in my mother's homeland, a small village. It's only in the last few years, actually, that this area has had postal or zip codes. Everyone just knew everyone. And as well as the towns, you have the villages and then the town lands. The town lands are very small areas like roads, really. Macroom itself was the last port of call for a man named Michael Collins, who was many things to many people. He was a revolutionary, a soldier, a politician, but now he's seen as one of the leading figures in the early 20th century struggle for Irish independence. And Beal na Bla, I'll spell that Bealnabrath, is not far from here at all. It's where he was ambushed and shot dead on the 22nd of August 1922. It's about 5 miles from here. And we're on a walk from where I'm staying, at the bottom of the hill, up to my mother's family home, up towards here where she grew up. She now lives in London, not too far from me, only about 10 miles away, but London traffic, that could be an hour's drive. And she'd do this walk every day, down to the local village at the bottom of the hill for school, for work as she had grown up, then to play, to meet friends, and walking to a dance in another village. She'd leave her shoes, all of them would, her family, on one of the rocks, the muddy shoes, and Monty, her dog, as she was growing up, would just sit there and guard the shoes the entire night. Different times, innocent times, people not afraid to walk miles and miles. It was all they could do. Of course, there's a lot of wildlife. Most of the animals in this area are wild hare, wild deer. You don't see any snakes. It's said that legendarily St. Patrick drove them all out of Ireland. And of course, a lot of cattle, a lot of sheep, and you might see a horse in a field, and an enormous amount of bees. A lot of the local people, my uncle in particular, he's a great beekeeper. He keeps about 20 hives in and around this area. And the area Cork, the actual word itself, has meaning to the landscape. The word Cork is a Gaelic word. It means marshy. Most people in Ireland speak Gaelic in this part of the country. Most of them, the older generation, especially the older generation, swap between the two. And the biggest Irish college, Gaelic college, in the whole of Ireland is in Ballingarry, a town about 6 miles from here. The land is marshy. In particular, it's full of peat bogs, turf. Peat is slow to grow, very slow to decay, and it can store masses of carbon dioxide. It makes it what we call a carbon sink. And it was cut and burned very regularly, but people now realise that, I suppose, leaving it in the ground can stop too much of the carbon dioxide getting into the atmosphere, so people don't burn it as much now. And it can, it's a mysterious thing to think of, it can mummify and preserve bodies. Some of the world's oldest human remains, bog bodies they're called, completely preserved, some of them over 2,000 years old, have been found in fields like these, and the peat stops the bodies from rotting. As I said, this is my mother's homeland. My father was from a place called Cavan, which is up in Ulster, in the centre of Ireland. And like many Irish did in the past, 1950s and 60s, a lot of them travelled to Britain and America, of course elsewhere, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, to seek their fortunes. And these fields would have been some of the last parts of Ireland that they would see. I consider myself London Irish, born and raised in London, but spent many of my holidays here, and I still try and get over as much as I can. It is cheap enough to fly over, and the journey is only an hour on the plane, and then it's only about half an hour drive from the airport. Financially, it ends up sometimes costing more to get from where I live in London to Gatwick, Heathrow or Stansted than it actually costs to take the flight. It costs more on the train, and the journey is longer. If I lived here, if I moved here with my family, I'd be called a blow-in. They're just blown in. A lot of the city folks move here. A lot of office workers working from home, people who want to write a play, novel, play music, paint. It inspires them. And when the first COVID lockdowns happened in March 2020, the restrictions made us all a bit more aware of space and nature, just getting out there. And because we're in the westernmost part of Europe, a lot of people say that the problems don't seem as harsh as they would in a city. The ripples are smaller and softer. But there are still problems, of course, same as you would get everywhere. The weather, for one, the social problems, political issues, crime, much less of that, the isolation and the loneliness, especially for a lot of the older community. The buses in these areas, down in the villages, used to be a bit more regular, but now there are a lot fewer of those. The children, of course, get free buses to school. The elderly do as well, and the people in the middle, the regular folks like us, would have cars, or would try to keep a car because you can get around more. So it seems a few people, I suppose, have been forgotten about, and a lot of them are the elderly. So there can be a bit of isolation here, and quite a few of the pubs have closed down in the villages. They're more open in the big towns, and it's difficult to get to them. As I said, a lot of city folks have moved here, but a lot of famous people have moved here and are from this area. Some of the most famous people born in Cork, I'm very proud of that, include the BBC comedian and presenter Graham Norton, the footballer, manager, pundit Roy Keane, the great blues guitarist, singer-songwriter Rory Gallagher is buried not too far from here, the actor Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, the wonderful, legendary actress Fiona Shaw, and one of the most famous and critically acclaimed actors at the moment, the great Cillian Murphy, is from a town Douglas, not far from here. But people have also moved here. Jeremy Irons, the British actor, and Sinead Cusack, his wife, live very close to here. Michael Flatley, River Dance, Lord of the Dance himself, owns a mansion in the hills of Cork. Harry Shearer, the great comedian, writer, actor, Harry Shearer has a house in Cork. And Angela Lansbury moved here. The late, great Angela Lansbury lived not too far from here. And she spent her time flitting between LA, where she was filming, and the hills of West Cork. What I love most about this area is the way history is left as a part of the landscape. Ancient stone circles, monuments carved by druids, pagans, scholars, some of them hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. They're simply left as part of the landscape. In other parts of the world, especially in the UK, they'd be concreted around them. They'd be restored. They'd be given a modern feel. You'd find a visitor's centre or a nice new road going up to them. Sometimes you'd have to pay to actually see them, places like Stonehenge, to get close enough to that. And they're fenced off. But here, the monuments, the stone circles, Drombeg, the stone circle, which is way over 2,000 years old, is not far from here at all. It's left as a monument. Here, they just take root. The stone is part of the landscape. And almost none of this area has changed in the last couple of 100 years. Maybe trees have been planted and grown. It was surprising for me when I was thinking about it that in the 1800s they burnt so much wood that there weren't many woods and forests in Ireland at all. It was all mountainous regions. So around here, the trees we see, a lot of them you couldn't see 100 years ago, even 70, 80 years ago. But now they're built up again. Difficult to be built on this land anyway, most of it. It's too marshy. The penal laws were imposed by the ruling British that was the 1700s. It was a bid, I suppose, to make people accept the reformed Christian faith, the Church of England, and the laws were really restrictive. They banned Catholics from buying land in their own country, voting, holding public office. So it was a restriction of rights and power. And another restriction, probably a very obvious one, was the banning of the celebration of the Catholic Mass. So areas around here, hidden away, you might find a stone altar in the middle of the woods or the corner of a field. Mass rocks, they were known as. The possibility of serving in the British Army was also forbidden. I suppose families would have forbidden it if the authorities hadn't. But quite a few famous soldiers were in this area. One of them was Michael O'Leary, who was the first Irish recipient of the Victoria Cross. Single-handedly charged down 2 German barricades in France, the Western Front. Arthur Conan Doyle, George Bernard Shaw campaigned to have a monument to him. And I love this area. I'm going to have a little walk around now and walk down to my family's house down in the village. And I do very much hope you join me again. Thank you for your support. Take care. Lots of love to you and see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.